Welcome everyone to another one of FAU's webinars. I am Dr. Peter Ricci. I run the Hospitality and Tourism Magnet program here. I call it Magnet program because I just left one of the high schools that has a Magnet program, so I apologize for that. I run the FAU Hospitality and Tourism program, of which we have many high school Magnet students joining us this semester. That's why I was at one of the schools. This is a continuation of our very large, unexpected global certificate that has now passed 80,000 in registrations globally in 165 countries. We decided that we would use this opportunity to continue to reach out to people who are in need of education, want to hear what's going on in the industry, talk to top leaders in different areas, and stay current. And it's very surprising to me that we are still having 3,000 to 5,000 people registered each time we do a webinar. So I applaud you for watching this. We are recording this, and we will be posting it on YouTube. Anyone who has registered will get a thank you email. And I want to say we've had about 500 requests for what do we teach in meetings and events, and how can you go beyond just this 1-hour webinar. So we will be sending you information on our meetings and events certificate that we have available. And for those of you who did not register and just happen to catch this on YouTube later on, you can always email us at hospitality@fau.edu, hospitality@fau.edu. What I'd like to start with is letting you know that I'm going to focus on 2021. We are right now December 3rd, 2020. Florida has just passed 1 million in COVID cases. We are the third state to do so. Our industry is still tanking, but I am optimistic, and I'm optimistic anecdotally in a one-person way today, because I have an employer database of about 1,000 employers that I personally post their job openings for free to the community at large. It's primarily our students, our certificate takers, our alumni that are on that list. But during pre-COVID, let's say in January of 2020, I was posting about 400 emails a week, and each email would contain multiple job postings. Of course, it went to 0. And then I had my first posting 2.5 months ago, and each week now there are more and more postings globally. This week already, and we're only we're not to the end of the week, but this week already I've had about 180 job postings. That's 180 emails, each with multiple job postings within them. So I see promise, I see headway. However, we're here today to talk about the events portion of our industry. The cruise industry and the live events portion of our industry have been hit the hardest. So that's why I want to look at 2021. I am so thankful to our panelists. I reach out to some of the best in the industry, and they actually reply to my emails and actually volunteered to be here. So I thank all of you in advance, and I'll thank you at the end. So I'm going to go by my screen and just go around and have everyone introduce themselves. You'll see we have a collection of actual planners and people who also serve in high levels in events professional organizations, so that you have a mixture of talents and information being shared with you today. So let me start with Carla. You're first on my screen. So if you would introduce yourself, your company, and your organization for us.
Thank you, Peter. I'm CSCP. I am the principal event planner in an event planning company in Charlotte, North Carolina. We produce weddings, corporate, and nonprofit events. And I'm also a longtime member of ILEA, the International Live Events Association, and I am their current Southeast Regional Vice President. So I work with our chapters in the Southeast region, so that's Orlando, South Florida Caribbean, Atlanta, Charlotte, Virginia, and I'm the liaison between them and our International Board of Governors.
Okay, and can you say for us your company name again, because it stuttered for a minute there?
Style.
Great, and what's your day-to-day type of event? What role do you do with style events?
Yep. So we work with our social clients on planning their weddings from start to finish. But then we also do conferences. We also do galas for our nonprofits. So yeah, we do a little bit of everything here in Charlotte.
Okay, and what is the mission, if you could think in a sentence or two, of the International Live Events Association for somebody watching who doesn't know about ILEA? What is their overarching goal?
Yeah, we're the leading event association for creative event professionals. We're a global a global association. So we work with industries all over in the live events industry. It's been just a wonderful organization. In terms of education, we've pushed out so many different webinars in terms of your network. So it's a wealth of knowledge. And we also have the CSCP designation that we just relaunched, which is our certificate or designation, certified special designation.
Okay, great. So for those of you viewing, we have a mixture in the audience from senior vice presidents to someone who's just started high school studying hospitality, so a mixture of everybody. So I always like to explain things a little more slowly, a little more deeply, because not everybody's familiar. And in the events industry, we're acronym soup. We have so many acronyms, so many short terms that people don't know. For those of you watching, the ILEA historically was known as ISIS, International Special Events Society, and then due to the unfortunate ISIS that evolved in the world, they changed their name several years back and have become ILEA. So if you knew them before as ISIS, it's the same talented group of professionals on the creative side for live events. And you can just look ilea.org and you'll find information. Let me move next to John. And John, if you would tell us a little bit about who you are and your company.
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. My name's John Palladino. I'm the owner and founder of Milestone Meetings. We're a boutique full-service planning agency based out of Scottsdale, Arizona. I started Milestone Meetings actually about a year and a half ago, right before this all had launched. And, I took a very dynamic look at this moving forward and really tried to pivot, like everyone says, to our current climate. So, like most of you on here, very passionate about the industry, but very new to the industry as well, being a business owner and trying to navigate through what we're seeing here. As the questions come up through today's moderation by Peter, I'm sure that we're going to get some more insight on what I'm seeing through 2021, and I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot on what you guys are seeing as well. Realistically, my focus with launching the agency was really focused on more corporate clients than associations or social. I do dabble in a little bit of association, but primarily my 16 accounts are corporate. Anywhere between small regional meetings, which we're seeing quite a bit of right now, to large annual conference, some user groups, things along those lines. So that's just kind of the nuts and bolts behind Milestone. We'll take care of obviously sourcing, contracting, but we also do dabble in full service planning as well.
Okay, and your background was in hotel operations, if I remember.
It was.
Right? Okay.
Yes, I was the hotel ops guy that got thrown into the sales role. So, yes. Yeah.
All right, great. Welcome.
Thanks, Peter.
Let me move over to Steve now. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Peter. So similar to John's description, my role is with Merit's Global Events. I'm the Enterprise Vice President and Chief Operating Officer. And what Merit's Global Events does is similar to what John does, probably just on a slightly different scale. We work with association, trade show, and corporate clients, doing every type of meeting, event, and incentive travel that's out there. In the pre-COVID world, let's say calendar 2019, we operated about 10,000 events. We booked 4.6 million room nights. We managed about $2 billion worth of our clients' investments in their meetings, events, and incentives. So now those numbers, I have no idea what it's going to look like as we go into 2021. They've dropped dramatically in 2020, as I'm sure everybody will reflect upon in their roles. In addition to that, I have the honor and privilege to work right alongside Mr. Paul Van Deventer. I am the now 2020 chair of the International Board of Directors. I have to think about that because I'm now serving in my second year as chair of the International Board of Directors for MPI, Meetings Professionals International. I'll let Paul describe what MPI is, but it's been an interesting and really kind of quite an honoring journey in that role. In 2019, we had what was a pretty normal year, and playing the role of chair, helping to put together strategy for the future of MPI, which is a very large industry association for the events industry, was almost routine, I'd have to say. 2020 was a whole different story. Working with Paul and with everybody else, trying to make sure that we maintain the ability to carry a 45-year-old or 48-year-old industry association out for another 48 or 50 years, it's been a challenge. So in that role as a volunteer leader, I've had the ability to use what I've seen in my day-to-day business of trying to work to make sure that we have a viable entity here for Marriott's Global Events and being able to do the same with MPI. So it's been a very, very interesting volunteer duty that I think initially I was told, it'll be 10 hours a month.
All lies.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, welcome. And I'm going to come back to you for my first question because of my personal history working at Marriott's as a late teenager, early 20s.
Great.
So
Great.
I'll save that. But what an interesting time. Now, I want to, before I go to Paul next, because he's the next logical after you mentioned him, if you're watching and you are not part of a professional organization in the events industry, you need to be in one. So I generally tend to tell students, start with Meeting Professionals International because I started and found it to be the broadest global. But if you know you're creative, then I'm going to push you toward ALIA. Or if I know you're really into the catering and food side, I'm going to push you into NACE, National Association of Catering and Events. Or if you're in South Florida and you work for one of the huge number of DMCs that we have here, the destination management companies, I might have you join Destinations International if you want to work at a promotion agency, or I might have you join the Destination Management Company Association. And again, destinations management, I'll let Deidre say it. so, but I'm going to try to steer you as a student early on. And now, thanks to COVID, when we get to Nancy, we'll talk about Live Events Coalition. So we will throw at you organizations. You can see that Steve has a day job that probably requires a lot of hours. And his time in the association is equally valuable to all of us. Carla and Alia, whoever it is, we get so much out of the industry, and we are in a turbulent time that we need to work on the future as a collective group. Otherwise, our industry will become disenfranchised. So I want to encourage all of you as you listen to these experts to realize, yes, we're all busy, but those of you who want to succeed, you're going to have to step up to the plate and participate in the voice of our industry as well. I can't emphasize that enough, whether you're 18 or whether you're 80 and still working. You need to be involved and active. So, Paul, let's go on to you next so you can talk about MPI. Oh, I have you muted. Let me see if you can unmute yourself. Let's see. See if we can hear you. Let me try again. Let's have you go down and do that.
I'm doing it again.
There you are. Now you're on.
Okay. Because I've got my remote broadcaster mic set up. So That confuses things. Thank you. And as Steve pointed out, he's my boss, and that's why I wore jacket today, because I got to look nice when my boss is on the call. But I've been blessed to have him for 2 years in this leadership role. Like Steve, I actually have 2 roles in the industry. So if you don't mind, Pete, I'm going to give a highlight of each of those.
Absolutely.
I'll start with Media Professionals International, MPI. We are the largest, most influential global association in the business events industry. We've got members in 80 countries around the world. We have over 70 chapters that are based in 20 different countries. We have a community of 80,000 active participants, and that community leads about $25 billion in event spending prior to COVID. So like Steve said, I have no clue what it looks like today. But in 2019, our community was investing $25 billion, or managing the investments of $25 billion of spend in live events.
Wow.
So very large, influential community. And to the point you make about stepping up and participating, we have 2 key roles. The first is professional development of those individuals in our community and our industry, so we advance our industry. And the second is to advocate for what this industry does, the benefits it delivers, whether they're the innovation and growth and development and the creativity, or the economic contributions as well. So that's the role of MPI. I wear this second hat, which is I am the volunteer chair. As Steve is the volunteer chair for MPI, I'm the volunteer chair for the Event Industry Council, which is called EIC. And that whole alphabet soup of organizations that Peter was mentioning are members of this great coalition. So this is a coalition of 35 of the most important organizations in the business event industry. And they represent 100,000 event professionals amongst those organizations. So our role is really looking at global advocacy, as well as certification and the advancement of education for the professionals in this industry. So those are the 2 roles that I play.
Interesting. And anybody watching, we do change and evolve quite a bit in the events portion of our overall hospitality business, because events, although people have met since medieval times and they equate events back to trading and marketplace and exhibitions and town squares and so on. I mean, until the late 70s, 80s, there was not even an officially designated meeting planner title in the Department of Labor. And there were no college programs. And so the Convention Industry Council rebranded to the Events Industry Council, which Steve just mentioned is EIC, because now I prefer the term event. There's all kinds of events, from a lecture to, I don't know, a workshop to a wedding to whatever, but they are all different types of events. And so if you get involved in this business, if you're not already, you will evolve with our evolution, because it's a fast-paced evolution. I will give a plug for all the organizations, and for MPI, if you look them up, it's mpiweb.org. So it's mpiweb.org. Don't forget the web part. That's how you find them. So let me skip over now to Marianne, and because she has involvement with MPI and as a planner. So Marianne, I'll have you up next.
Thank you, Peter, and
Welcome.
thank you for asking me to be a part of this very accomplished panel. And as you said, I do have history with a lot of people on this call. As a matter of fact, I could not be doing what I am doing now if it wasn't for MPI, and if it wasn't for Merit, and if it wasn't for you, Peter. So thank you. I started prior to COVID in the gig nation, which had become so popular. I had left Merit 6 years ago and wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I wanted to do more operations, but I didn't necessarily want to start a company. So I became an independent planner and worked with all kinds of great organizations. I got to work with some associations. I got to work at the Olympics in 2016. I got to work with some corporations. And it was just, the wave was riding. There were more business for gig workers than ever before. And then, of course, the pandemic happened and everybody was reinventing themselves. And I really dug deep and discovered my true passion has been for the longest time sustainability. And there is such a need for it. And I have been able to do a lot of consulting work now to help events, help associations and corporations be more sustainable. And if that's with corporate social responsibility, if it's becoming just more resourceful, and it has just been booming. And I definitely see that rising in the future. No longer are we going to have that comfort of saying, do I want my meeting or event sustainable? It's going to have to be sustainable. And I definitely see the future in that.
Perfect.
And then, of course, my other passion is teaching. And I'm very lucky to be able to work with you and work with FAU to teach the meeting and events class that's every fall. And for the first time, we're now going to offer it in the spring. So it's just been a great ride.
Awesome. Thank you and welcome. Deidre, let me go to you, and I'm going to save Nancy for last because her association is newest. And it ties in nice to this opening conversation. So Deidre, let's introduce what you do and talk a little bit about the DMC world.
Well, my name is Deidre Avaday. And first of all, again, Peter, thank you for letting me join. I also have some great connections to some people. Mary Ann taught a class, and one of her graduates was one of my very, very top captains in my company. So hi, Mary Ann, and thank you. I own Cream of the Crop, COTC Events, and that is a DMC down here in South Florida. I am also on the board of ADME, Peter, Association of Destination Management Executives International.
ADME.
I'm also on the board of the new organization DMC Coalition. So I very clearly want to be in the room where it happens.
Excellent. And for those watching who do not know what a destination management company is, would you give like a 2 or 3 sentence explanation on that? Because I get that a lot, even from seasoned professionals in the business.
Absolutely, absolutely, no problem. A DMC is kind of a mixture between an architect, someone who is going to design the event, combined with a general contractor of someone who's pulling together all the vendors and all the components. If you think of DMCs, primarily our role is to be an expert in whatever destination we're based in. So we're kind of the glue. You have a hotel, you book airlines, and we're the people on the ground who are making a lot of the magic happen. So we're taking the people from the airport to the hotel. We're doing great, beautiful parties in the evening. We're taking people to see the things that are exceptional about South Florida, from the Everglades to Little Havana, Art Deco district. There's so much down here. It's driving.
Great. I rely on DMCs a lot when I plan anything, and I really appreciate that part of our business. All right, and last but not least, we will introduce Nancy Schaefer. So Nancy, tell us about your company and your new organization.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for including me, Peter. It is, as Mary Ann said, a delight to be with such an esteemed panel, and in a very interesting and strange time, but in some respects an exciting time. As everybody said, pre-COVID, I had a boutique strategic event planning firm in Washington, D.C. We focused on the corporate, nonprofit, and some association market. I joke, I do some social work, and that's usually for somebody who has a really big budget or somebody who I love and then they don't pay me. So I prefer to avoid that. But, you know, Bravo has been in existence since 1997. I jumped off of a cliff and said, ooh, this is fun, after running a bar. Thinking this could be really cool, and fast forward, here we are. I've had an amazing opportunity to work with remarkable clients, and I believe that any live event is the telling of a story. So I consider myself a storyteller, and I want to make sure that that impact lives on long after the event is over, whether it's a concert, a meeting, a gala, anything and everything. And then when we got to COVID and everybody started to pivot, my pivot kind of came to me. I did not go to it. Many of you may know of the Live Events Coalition. It was started by a gentleman by the name of Isaac Rothwell, who, like all of us, kind of woke up one day and went, holy you know what? What can I do? So he threw up a petition on change.org and said, okay, I feel better, went to sleep, woke up the next day, there were 10,000 signatures on that petition. Fast forward now, there's close to 500,000. But what that said is that there was a need for an organization whose sole mission was to advocate, was to bring our industry's attention to those up the street from me, because I actually live on Capitol Hill, to pay attention and understand that our industry is made up of remarkable, skilled professionals, small businesses, and that we have an ecosystem that is massive and an economic impact that is just as massive. The mission of the Live Events Coalition is to basically represent all of the different types of events. So Aliyah happens to be one of our industry partners. MPI is on my list to have a nice conversation with you guys, but it's to just bring everybody together. We're a very verticalized industry, and our goal is to make sure that everybody has at least representation when it comes to advocacy work.
Sure.
So my pivot landed in my lap, and I am the president of the Live Events Coalition.
Awesome. Welcome. I have to say, when all of you watching, you forget all of the pieces, the companies that bake wedding cakes, the linen companies, the on-call banquet setup crew, the people who manufacture exhibition booths. All of those people are part of our business. The motor coach operators, the security guards at the convention centers, all of those people, and suddenly live events just stopped. So, we can't Zoom and WebEx and Teams forever, but we're using it as a pseudo replacement. And what Nancy said really touched me. There are meetings that popped in my head and events right when she said telling a story. There are events we've all been to that you remember vividly, what you ate, who was there, what the decor was. It's an industry that will not go away. So one of the first questions I'll start with, and I do take a little longer than normal to introduce everybody because there's a story to be told going around the table. A repetitive question that emerged, is my industry going to be here? I've loved it for 20 years. I've loved it for the 1 year since I graduated. Should I vacate? My answer is absolutely no. Step up and participate in one of these organizations so that you can be that collective voice that gets people traveling again. Right now I'm in a state where we have no statewide mandate for masks. It's county by county. Some people on my street traveled for Thanksgiving. Others haven't left their homes since February and refuse to. We're in this very confused state as a country in terms of travel, but we will bounce back, and we can't all wait for the vaccine. We have to be creative in the meantime. So let's talk a little bit about 2021. It's funny because I titled this The Realities of 2021, and you've already heard from several of our panelists that I have no idea. So we are being completely honest, So I'll start on the education side. We have no idea whether hospitality enrollments will increase because people want to finally finish their degrees. They want to get a certificate they never had time to because they've been working 50-hour weeks. Or are you home as a high school student and both of your parents have been laid off, one from an airline, one from a cruise line, and you are told adamantly you will not study hospitality? So we don't know. is a real answer. Our enrollments were up in the summer. They were slightly down 4.5% in the fall, and it's too early to tell for the spring. So I'll start with enrollment. I don't know. Anecdotally, in South Florida, if you're in the hotel business, you are surviving much better if you're on the beach, because people like to open their doors, they feel safer, they can go outside. If you're even 1 mile inland, you're not faring as well. So doing budgeting right now, we're in budget season, which to me is just laughable, but we're in budget season. So even within our little niche area, hotels really are having a hard time budgeting. I had a call today with a Ritz-Carlton general manager, and he told me that South Florida is performing best for them in the nation because they have so many beach products here. So let me go around. Carla, let me start with you. What are you seeing for 2021 in terms of your own business? And you don't have to give exact numbers, of course, but your prediction, and what are you seeing in terms of numbers of members in ILEA? The organizations concern me, because without a job, you may not pay your membership renewal. So tell me what you're seeing in both so far.
Mm-hmm. Well, just in my day-to-day, so there was a lot of cancellations and moving to 2021. So I think in 2021, my clients, they're going to move forward. I think we've been prepared and prepped for what it's going to be in 2021, whether it's 50 people, 100 people, an outdoor event, a hybrid event. I think people are moving forward and getting more comfortable in what it's going to have to be. So they've waited. I don't see them in social postponing it out another year. In terms of associations, I think we've all seen a decline in membership, but in terms of ILEA, we have worked really hard to provide member benefits and things to hold on to our members, and are leveraging relationships with other associations. So like Nancy mentioned, we've partnered with Live Events Coalition, because that's one thing that we heard from our membership about that advocacy, because we need that advocacy portion, someone lobbying for us to give us that relief we need to hold on until things get better. I don't see, Q3 will probably be better next year, but I don't see people, especially on the social side, pivoting another year. I think it's going to continue, and it just it is what it is, and we're going to move forward with the restrictions, what we have to do, masks, safety, and take all those measures.
Okay. John, how about you? Since you're dealing primarily with corporate, what are you seeing so far for next year?
Yeah, Q1's looking pretty soft, Peter. We're taking a lot of larger annual programs and breaking them down more into regional and divisional programming. We're seeing that going into Q2 as well. But I'd say the end of Q2, we're still plugging along. We're not really making any strategic moves on repositioning anything. Luckily, when I started the agency, there's normally an 18 to 24-month lead time on a lot of these larger programs. So a lot of that stuff was already booked far enough out where it wasn't really impacted with everything that we are seeing. Surprisingly, I am seeing a lot of RFPs come through for 21, though. We actually just secured a large piece of business for Orlando just right before Thanksgiving. That's looking at bringing in about 2,200 attendees. I think it was an eye-opener for a lot of folks that, there is still new business out there. Not so much in 21, but, even in 20, I had an advisory board meeting that came up out of nowhere, and they placed that program just outside of Atlanta. It wasn't large whatsoever. It was about 25 guests and attendees. But realistically, I think that the smaller stuff is going to stick through Q1 and Q2, and we can start to see kind of a lift in Q3 going into Q4 of 21.
Okay, and I think people are tired of not meeting, and they're tired of Zoom and WebEx. So there's a point where we're all COVID burned out, or whatever the term is of the day, and I think we will have to start meeting to just stay human. And I think a lot of people are at that point, And if they're a little more risk taker, they'll be the first one to step up and try it. And if it goes okay, and they've had a distance meeting, then, you know, I went to an American Culinary Federation meeting, and they put it off to be virtual, then back to face-to-face, then virtual, then finally it was face-to-face, and we distanced perfectly. And I was the speaker, I was virtual, so I think the hybrid is here to stay where it fits, but I don't think it's the end-all, be-all. I want to go down to Steve now, and I'm sorry I say go down, I see you in my corner. When I was a late teenager, early 20s, I fell in love with incentive travel. For those of you watching, incentive travel is when we motivate people for some type of performance achievement using travel as the motivational tool. In my master's in the late 80s, I wrote a paper about using travel as a motivator, and in most every study, it performed better than a cash bonus or an appliance or an electronic, because an incentive was a magical experience, especially in the greed is good 80s, when our incentives were over the top, excessive, and beautiful. So, Steve, I want to ask you, like right now, everybody's in the doldrums, and companies are losing, some of them losing profitability, some, you know, laying off. I would really like to incentivize my group, and I can't do it with a trip. So how are you dealing with clients that historically did incentives? What are they thinking for 21 and 22? I don't even know if you have a comment on that.
Well, for 21, much like what John was just mentioning, I think what we're seeing is some sustainment toward the back half of the year. So, you know, I think that we will see probably smaller incentive opportunities that will continue to operate, likely domestically only to begin with, at the back half of 21. In 22, we still have a full slate of business that is scheduled to operate kind of all around the world. But I think what we've seen since March is that companies are trying to figure out alternate ways to reward performance, because in many cases, they were well into the campaign contest period, and people had qualified, and there would be just immense dissonance for not giving them some reward. So we've been working with our customers to either do loaded debit cards, filtered debit cards. In fact, we just transitioned an entire swath of incentive travel programs to a filtered debit card that would allow individual travel only within really travel providers, so hotels, airlines, things like that. So it's still, it's per se not, the company's brand is not going to be on it, but it's going to give people a reward that will allow them to travel, and they're just really, really wanting to do so. In other cases, we've switched to other modes of rewards, be it through point systems, be it through merchandise, et cetera. And we're looking at alternatives there too, where good performance equals a reward. That reward could be turned into something like, we tend not to go to cash, Peter, because that just gets lost, right? It goes to pay the grocery bills, it goes to pay the gas bill, et cetera, and there's no trophy value, there's no way to celebrate the performance when you turn things into cash. But you can use those things in a time like this where so many people are in need. We have found that there's an entire swath of people that want to use their rewards and turn it into something that benefits others. So a way to give away those points, give away those dollars to meaningful charities and causes, and that's been something that our clients and their award-earning participants have really turned to as well.
Excellent. Yeah, I just, I hope that we don't move to a movement away from travel as the incentive, because I find it to be the best. I mean, I've worked on consulting projects where an owner would say, oh, they're going to get a washer, dryer, a refrigerator, a crib. I'm like, what if they don't want that or need it? Well, then I'm going to just give them cash. Well, you know what? After taxes, they're going to pay one credit card down, and their excitement is gone within the 30 seconds to click pay on that bill. Whereas going on a trip, and Marianne and I, Landry and Kling does cruise incentives. We've worked on the cruise side. We've worked on land-based. I worked for a lady and her husband, Marcia Remock, back in the 80s, who run a company called Aquarius International. She used to do all the incentives for Office Depot. I mean, there's nothing more magical than getting Carla and her group and Deidre and her group to create some fantasy live event that you are spending time with the CEO, with the leaders. You don't forget that. That doesn't go away like the piece of paper, here's your bonus, goodbye. So I'm just glad to hear that, because that's a concern of mine inside, Let me, on this 2021 theme, before I shift to another question, Paul, let me ask you, what is the organization doing to adapt going into 2021? I mean, it's kind of hard to move a boat that large that has a lot of things in place, but what are you doing to be nimble and on top of things?
Well, I think the first thing to come to a consensus on, and when I say all, that's Steve and the board, and it's my leadership team, was what is our focus in this crisis? So we sat there last March seeing the wave coming and said, what do we need to do? And we put out there a very succinct mission, which is we need to MPI for future generations so that we can continue providing value for another 50 years and advancing this industry. So everything we do needs to be focused on sustainability, surviving the crisis, while, and this is the key, giving as much back to our community to help our members through this. So two perspectives: financial prudence, liquidity, and giving back as much as we can in an educational networking perspective to help the community. Okay. And interestingly, when you asked about membership, our membership is pretty evenly divided between those who are professional planners and those who provide services to the planners. When you look at those who provide services, our membership has dropped in a pretty significant way, and we budgeted for that. We expected that, but those memberships are paid by their employer.
Sure.
Planner membership has actually increased, and most of that is paid by themselves. So planners have recognized to get through that, they need to group together again. They need to do what your point earlier, they need to group with that association, with their like kind, help each other out, manage that network, take the education on, reskill themselves for digital environments, hybrid environments, and think differently. So as an organization, we've been looking at it from how do we get through this so we're around for the future, but how do we help those individuals who want to reskill themselves and help themselves through this?
Interesting. I'm 55 years old. I finished my master's in '89. So in '87 or '88, I joined MPI. And at that time, you could either be a student, a planner, or a supplier. So I was a student member for 3 years, and I remember how heartbroken I was when I graduated, because I was neither yet a planner or a supplier, but I couldn't stay a member. And I was like, no, and I'm so glad all these years later, you now have a bridge for that. And luckily, I became an incentive salesperson, so I became on the supplier side. But I never forget that I lost my family, because MPI has been like a family to me all these years. Very interesting. So, and
that is I joined 8 years ago when I took this role, and I just did a listening tour up front, and the common refrain I heard over and over is, MPI is my family. It is my family home and my career. And we really appreciate that, the strength of that community, and that's what we try to build around.
But it's funny because I have like 2 family in ILEA, and I have 2 family in NACE, and I have 2 family in SITE. Another acronym for all of you watching, we talked about incentive travel a little bit. There is the Society of Incentive Travel Excellence, SITE, which is another group you should join. And there's a brand new group that launched last month called Women in Travel Thrive. And it's a group that is very concerned about females always having had a difficult time to break the glass ceiling to the CEO office in hospitality. And now with COVID, possibly taking longer to regroup in business than their male counterparts. It's a very interesting group called Women in Travel Thrive. So you'll have to look that up. So yes, we've already thrown at you 30 associations to join. So let me move on to another question. All right. I'll start with Deidre for this question. These are random. I don't start with any particular person. They don't even know the questions, right? But this one I want to hear from you guys. What would the panelists suggest that we do, and this is, remember, over hundreds of people, it's into the same question. What would the panelists suggest that we do while we are waiting to return to normal or new normal? Should I go back to school, or should I do something else? Or honestly tell me if I should leave the business. So in your own words, Deidre, what would you say to somebody who comes to you and asks you that?
This is a great question. Okay, so we don't want to leave the business. The reality is that we may need to do some other things while we're waiting for the business to come back. A lot of people in our industry right now have taken other kind of part-time jobs or kind of, the gig jobs that Nancy was referring to earlier to kind of get by with the idea to stay in the industry but still pay some bills before that comes back. So, that is a reality, I think, for many people. Going back, I am always a proponent of education. I think that we saw a tremendous amount of support, Peter, for the certificate program this summer. I was amazed at how many of my colleagues and people that I know were flashing on Facebook and on LinkedIn. And these are people that you would think, knew it all anyway, so why did they need continuing education? But they did. I think we've definitely hammered in the fact that, and I'll speak for myself on this, but right now, because of coronavirus and because I don't have my regular job running the DMC, that doesn't consume all of my time and energy, I have space and time now to go into this give back and to volunteering and to being part of organizations, which is not easy. Volunteer-run organizations are not always smooth. They are, but Nancy will have to help me out on this later, but, it's just the nature of kind of being part of a committee and being part of teams that are trying to put good things together. But it has been amazing, all the things that are being talked about. I feel like all of the other DMCs, the great DMCs that are down here in the South Florida area with me, have all kind of come together and supported each other. We're working towards the same thing. There's been tremendous camaraderie with people coming together with this, which has been amazing. And we're achieving things and we're changing things and we're still being productive. So back to the side, don't get out of the industry. Do what you have to do. Do what you have to do financially to get across the bridge. Okay, so education and basically get involved. Get involved. I think we commiserate well together and we strategize well together. Nancy, what are your thoughts on that while you're waiting for the normal or whatever it is to come back? What would you do to prepare to make yourself better? I think you're muted. There you go.
First and foremost, don't wait for normal to return. Normal is never returning. Normal doesn't exist. Yesterday is gone. But what this has done, I believe, is it's done a couple of things that I think are remarkable. I think that it has shed a light on an industry that has, for the most part, been invisible. And for the most part, most people outside of our group don't really know what we do. If you think about it, when you arrive at an experience, whether it's a meeting, a concert, a gala, a wedding, it's done. You walk in, you sit down, it's been prepared for you, you experience it, and you leave. We're magicians. And in that, we make magic. And I think that what has happened through this, which is one of my two silver linings, is it has given our opportunity, it's given our industry the opportunity and the necessity to educate and build awareness outside of us of why we are so critical. So to anyone who is considering this industry, this is an amazing industry. It is filled with passionate, creative, powerful human beings. highly talented. And the part that we have that I think others don't have, that is an extra plus, is family. I'm not sure at a legal firm the lawyers are going to say, oh, they're all my family. We all consider that to be it. One of the things that's so hard for us is that we miss being with each other. We miss running in and giving each other a hug. We miss the fact that we create magic. So if you are a young, middle, or old person who thinks that this is the way to go, it's the way to go. For a lot of reasons. Number one, there's a new opportunity, because what's going to happen when we do reopen is there's all these new things that are going to happen. You've got COVID compliance, you've got hybrid, you've got all of these things. What doesn't change is the passion and engagement. The other silver lining to COVID is I'm sitting here speaking to, with the exception of Peter, who I've talked with, and Deidre, who I talk with on a regular basis, with a bunch of people that otherwise I never most likely would have met. That is my silver lining. It is humbling. It's exciting. Don't leave the industry.
I agree with that. I've met so many people from the certificate going viral that I would have never met in the world, you know? That's how I saw Carla. I looked up Eileen. I said, who's Eileen's best and brightest, and who's in the Southeast? Here's her picture. I read about her. I would have never known Carla, and that's how I met her, you know? I'm going to just read this one, but we've already answered it, and it will touch the sentiment of hundreds that I got in a similar way. I'm an events professional. I've been in the business for 15 years. I did my MBA early on, but it took me a long time to get over the fear of doing the CMP. I finally did the CMP. It was scarier than my MBA. Due to the pandemic, I had to leave my beloved industry. I've been in the healthcare side of events the entire time. My question is, what can I do to remain active in events, to stay sane and relevant when things rebound? So, to all of you watching, there were hundreds of statements similar to this. So take what we've all just talked about. Do a little homework and find out which organization best matches your passion. Is it, ILEA? Is it the DMC side of the world, the DMO? Is it MPI? Is it site? Whatever it is. So take that step. Go ahead and, you've always said, no, I don't have time. I can't be on a committee. I'm working too much, and yada, yada, yada. We all have that side of our brain. Just shake that out. Now's the time to do something good for the world and for yourself and help the industry move forward. With 10 years, your MBA, your CMP, whoever wrote this question, you are part of the solution. And you have to get out there and be a part of the solution to make it happen. So I just wanted to share that one because it was very, very similar throughout, that type of question. I'm going to go to Mary Ann on this one. They're actually two together. I've been in planning for a long time. I'm very OCD myself about hygiene. At the same time, I'm obsessive compulsive about sustainability and regenerating the world. I find that a lot of my clients talk about sustainability but don't really know what it is. I'm lucky to have a piece of business in March 2021, and they want me to suddenly become the internationally recognized expert on sustainability. So where do you direct me, and tell me, is there a place for sustainability to learn from? So I'll throw that one at you because it's right up your alley.
Oh, great question. Believe it or not, the Events Industry Council has a whole committee on sustainable events. And I would highly recommend going to that website first. They've got some great information there. And you can also join the Sustainability Committee. There's, depending on what region this person is in, I know I belong to the South Florida and Caribbean Sustainability Committee, but there are also other committees to get involved in, but that would be a great resource.
Okay, and that's Sustainable Event Alliance, I think
No, it's part of the Events Industry Council.
Okay.
So you go to the Events Industry Council website, and then they have a whole section on sustainability.
Okay. And along those lines, I'm going to throw this one to Carla. It might be a little hard, but I like moving around. So this one says, sustainability keeps coming up to me this year. It's like we caused the pandemic. We ruined the industry. Because we're in the travel business, I get blamed by a lot of my friends for having caused COVID. So I educate them and say this is not true. You know, it just is it just is what it is. I would like you to ask the panelists their answer to this. I hear regularly that sustainability is about doing less harm, and regenerative meetings or regeneration is about doing more good. There are standards, guidelines, and certifications for every area of the meetings and events industry. Can any of them comment on the term regenerative meetings? So, Carla, if you can, otherwise anybody jump in. Have you heard that term? No? Anyone? Because we heard for a while that, I don't know if you remember, Carnival started sailing a ship where the passengers signed up to help on one of the islands, and they would go and spend a week, and they would do similar to Habitat for Humanity. That didn't sail for a long period of time. I don't think it had a lot of follow-up. But is there an area where you see this working? I mean, I do know conferences that I've gone to where one day is donated if you'd like to. Instead of doing a city tour, you can do 3 hours and go volunteer. I see John nodding. You have any things you've done like that?
I think those CSR programs, I think Marianne was the one that had mentioned it earlier. I mean, I think those are becoming more and more part of people's programs, just corporate responsibility in general. It breaks up the norm, and it makes people feel a little bit better, too, about just giving back to the community that they are hosting the program in. I think that moving forward, you know, we talk about hybrids. You're also going to see a lot more of those implications coming through for some of these large-scale programs. So I can't say that term that you had brought up earlier. What was it, a regenerative meeting?
Regeneration, regenerative meetings. I'm not too familiar with that terminology yet either, but it makes sense. Go ahead.
Yeah, and with the volume of programming that Steve takes care of at Merritt's, I mean, it would be interesting to see if he's even heard that term before, because I haven't myself.
It's kind of more of a carbon off-print. More companies are trying to offset their carbon footprint, and by doing that, it's kind of that term regeneration, but it's not used very often.
Yeah, because the questions along those lines were, what are the professional organizations doing not only to address sustainability, but also regenerative practices? So the focus from this niche group of questions was that sustainability has always been focused on doing less harm, using reusable washable linens, using natural light instead of electric, and so on, whereas regeneration would be doing something good for the community at the same time while you're there. And the only thing I really have participated in on my own was in a conference in New Orleans where we had the option to go do 4 hours in an equivalent of Habitat for Humanity. But I wanted to throw that in there because sustainability and regeneration came up from a lot of people during this COVID time, more than I've heard before in the past.
Peter, I'd be happy to comment on that if I could.
Go ahead.
And I'm going to, Paul, you'll recognize this right away. I'm going to make a plug for one of our former, or past chairs rather, of MPI, Fiona Pelham. She has really waded into how do we make our events industry something that actually promotes sustainability. So I would encourage people, if they have questions about this, go out to her website is positiveimpactevents.com. There's a lot of information out on her website about the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. How do you make your events align with those. And she has been, I mean, literally herself carrying the flag for years now, trying to get the UN to understand the benefits of our events industry, what we bring to not only the economy, but to local communities, to jobs, everything. And also, by the same token, making sure that the event professionals have access to the information that they need in order to basically pull off events that are very sustainable, that are not doing damage, that are having the right stewardship for the industry and the environment.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I think echoing on that or adding to that, as all the terms you're talking about, whether it's environmental, whether it's regenerative, they come under that all-encompassing 17 goals of the UN Sustainable Development Initiative. So there are numerous areas within the UN's goals that I am seeing every one of our planners, every one of our organizations that invest in live events taking serious focus in different areas. One or two of those areas of the 17 goals that they're focusing on, and that might be recycling, it might be food waste, but it also, in many cases, is much more than that. It is helping the community in which they're hosting the event. It is providing for a future benefit to those individuals who attend and or are impacted by that event being held there. So that whole focus around what the UN is doing, we are seeing being embraced more and more by all the professional planners in our community, and as noted by Marianne, within the EIC community as well, in the sustainable efforts going on there.
And Peter, if I could just, not to beat a dead horse here, but take one of the original questions, which was, our industry is to blame for COVID. One, I'm not sure how you make that tie-in, but what I do believe is that our industry can help the world recover from COVID. Solutions get made through events, through business events. Our industry, when you look back at the 2018 numbers that were done from the economic impact of business events alone was over $1 trillion. We touched the lives of 1.5 billion people on the earth. Our industry can be a key to recovering, both with finding solutions to what, the economic issues that are going on, finding medical solutions when you think about the medical meetings that take place every year. So I think that, we need to turn that around and cast a positive light to the benefit that will come when events can be held again for the world.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and I would tell you it's probably less than half of 1%. But when I was getting inquiries, thousands of emails a day at the height of the certificate from around the globe, I would get 1 out of 500 or 1,000 that blamed our industry for the pandemic, because we encourage travel, we encourage meetings, we encourage this. And it really kind of stopped me in my tracks, but I listen to all sides. I'm a very open-minded, broad-thinking kind of person. And, I listen, but I 99.999% agree with you more. We are the solution, not the problem, because collectively we will help the world. And we will help the world faster by meeting together and coming up with strategic solutions with multiple brains in the room, or on the WebEx. This question I thought was kind of a little entertaining for me, but actually realistic. I want to ask someone who's doing planning right now, when is it politically correct, in your opinion, to market your event, but showing the people 6 feet apart when you close the door and they're not going to be 6 feet apart at the meeting? What are you doing in your collateral versus what are you doing in your reality? So Carl, let me ask you, because you do social. I can't imagine that 6-foot rule is going to hold in place very well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very true comment, and not executed anything in this year. Mine have moved to 2021, which is kind of a good thing, because it also comes down kind of like to a personal comfortability on a previous webinar, I heard someone say, you know, if you are not comfortable, you almost got to get out of business in a sense. So it is kind of hard, and we are playing two sides of the fence, because when it comes to, you know, safety and taking those measures, mask wearing, distancing, like, it definitely has to be done. And I do think it should be showcased, and not just for fun, just the mask for the fun picture. Like, it really needs to be done as a professional. We really need to be executing these mandates and things like that. So it's real touchy.
Okay, it's interesting. Nancy, go ahead, and then I'll go to Paul. Go ahead, Nancy, first.
So I think that one of the things that's really, really important, and it's part of who we are. So if you want to blame us for this pandemic, I'm not sure what planet you're on. You can't blame us on this pandemic. But, you know, ours was the industry that the doors were shut, slammed, and away you go. But one of the things that is happening is that we are now looking at those events differently, and we are looking at them and saying, okay, it's our job to make sure that we do keep people safe. So at the Live Events Coalition, for instance, we have a health and safety committee, and literally they are looking at every certification and every opportunity and speaking to epidemiologists, that's a big word, to make sure that when we do come back, or when we do advertise an event per se, that we're very, very conscientious of the fact that consumer confidence is going to be one of our biggest challenges. And so what is our messaging as we tell our story? I said early on, we're storytellers. Part of our new story is our story. So it's not my client's story only, it's my client's story, and the fact that the story from the event professionals are, this is what we are doing to make this a safe environment. Nobody can guarantee that everybody's going to be safe. Before the pandemic, somebody could have tripped and broken their leg. So, but it's so vast that we have to remember that we are the solution makers. That's what we are. We're problem solvers. None of us would be in this industry if we couldn't be critical thinkers. And so right now we're doing that, and we're coming together, and we're working with groups like ESA, which is the Event Safety Alliance. We don't do a particularly good job as an industry about talking about what we do and who we are. So part of that in that messaging for those people that are doing that is just be transparent. Be honest. This is what we're doing. Ask your potential attendees, what would make you feel safe? We don't have those answers. We can give them, but this is the time to be transparent, to be thoughtful, to engage with others in our industry, to ask what they're doing, to come up with best practices, because we will reopen. But don't back away from it. Just put it out there. I think it's the only way that we're going to be able to move forward.
Okay. And Paul, what were you going to say on that topic?
Well, I first want to cover a little what Nancy just said. The event industry, with their Apex task force, has been deeply involved all year in documenting the best practices and the operational principles for duty of care and wellness under a pandemic. So, again, referencing, going back to Event Industry Council, look at their site. There are very practical guidelines for traveling, being at the event, how to coordinate and host the event, how to communicate, all put together by industry experts and volunteers engaged with the science side of the business. So that's there. MPI, 4 weeks ago, hosted a conference with 700 people in digitally. And it wasn't for show. It wasn't for social media to have a nice picture with someone's mask on and then to disappear behind the doors and everyone take them off. We did that very purposely. And we did with the intention of saying, if you're comfortable and you want to participate, there's a great opportunity to network and learn. If you're not comfortable, don't come. There's other alternatives. You can engage digitally. But those who do come, everyone in that room, the 700 people, have a responsibility to do this safely, to do this in a way that others can learn from. So we can now document it. We can use this as a case study. We can put out best practices. And we showed that you can go from a morning process of doing health tests, screening everyone who comes on site, creating a safe zone, having a clinic on site, managing the process of mass social distancing through the day, through education, and then into night receptions, and still have an effective meeting while maintaining all the proper wellness guidelines. And we came out of that meeting with no cases of COVID directly traceable back to that event that occurred. So we had 700 people there, but we had to emphasize the whole time, you're not here just as an attendee. You are here as a practitioner of duty of care, of safe practices to demonstrate to everybody else.
Wow, that's fantastic. So, I'm trying to take a point along the way at different times to think, the realities of 2021. So it sounds like business down, nobody can really still predict. If anything, quarter 4 will be better than quarter 3, hopefully, than 2, than 1. More transparency and communication to your clients than ever before, asking them for their input instead of us leading a little bit more, getting the input more than ever before, and definitely using the professional organizations for advocacy and best practices and kind of learning from each other. I think more of us are learning from each other than we ever have before, and I attribute a lot of that to the pandemic putting a stop for a while and giving us a breathing space. That's why we had 80,000 people in a certificate, because they finally didn't have their 60-hour front desk shift, or they finally weren't their flight attendant picking up their 3rd extra flight of the week, or whatever the case was. We stopped and we were able to, like Steve said, be a change agent for good when we collectively think together. So interesting to hear all this. One of the questions, or several of them, asked about what's the future for live entertainment, comedians, keynote speakers, magicians, roaming people at the cocktail parties, all those social things. That's a huge part of what Nancy's organization is trying to support, those unremembered people that are so important in our organizations. And I didn't want to answer them, but what is the future? We're not going to have all avatars and holographs, are we? Are we eventually going to, have you done meetings right now, like Paul, at the meeting you just had? Did you have entertainment? Did you distance it? How did you do the social part of it?
We had entertainment. We also had entertainment brought to us digitally. Blend there of it. I think one of the lessons that was learned is the core reason. You have to go back to the core reason for that event. What is the reason you're bringing people together? Is it education? Is it networking? Is it reward and incentive? And I think over the last, coming out of the Great Recession, we've been on a 10-year high of 1 year being better than the next. And I believe we've overproduced in some ways some of our events. And what we did 4 weeks ago was a pretty event. It was back to the core principles of we're here to learn, we're here to network, and we're here to advance our industry. And in some ways, you learn a lot of that frills, the pomp and circumstance on the top may not always have been as necessary as it was. And it may actually have been cutting into some of the value delivered. So I think you're still going to have the need for entertainment. You're going to have the need for great content. That's core to it. But some of the extra frills, maybe it's slower in coming back than we saw in the past few years.
Okay. Marianne, how about this one? Do you see any challenge on maintaining prices as we move into 2021 with your clients? Are they all asking for discounts? Like, I know if this was a panel of hotel general managers, I would know the answer. But on the meeting side, what are you hearing from your clients? Are they like, hey, the hotel's at 50% off. What are you doing? What's in it for me on your side?
Well, believe it or not, when we, in 2020, when we had to start moving things into 2021, really all of the clients I was working with wanted their rates protected because their fear was, with so many people moving into 2021, they might not have the availability, they might not still get the same amenities. It was really interesting. So they didn't look at it as, oh, wow, now I have the, buying power and I want the rates lowered. They really wanted things protected.
Interesting.
Yeah, it really was.
Hey,
How
Peter,
about you? Yeah. Go ahead,
on
Nick.
that, I think that the thing that, and this, I have been on this soapbox probably my entire career. And right now especially, please don't give a fire sale. We are so valuable and we are so important. And if we give a fire sale, we diminish our value. And right now is when we showcase why our value is so important. Everybody flipped to virtual and they said, well, how hard is that? You're just setting up a Zoom. I'm going to take that $75,000 fee and I'm going to give you $10,000. And you're like, no, I'm producing a TV show. It's 10 times harder. So again, if we are going to maintain and elevate our industry that is full of such remarkable, talented people, we can't diminish our own value. Mm-hmm. And if somebody says you're not worth that, in my book, I move to the next one because I am worth that, and everybody that I know is worth that. And so this is that time where we come together and we protect ourselves from an industry that will undercut one another. Don't do it. This is the time right now to stand strong.
It's interesting you say that because, primarily I still think of myself as a hotel manager since that was my biggest chunk of my career path. But the hotels always rush to discount, and Smith Travel Research, STR Global now, has proven time and time again that you can't micro increase, demand by discounting. It just does not work, and it doesn't work to any great extent, especially for profitability. But it's interesting that is the mentality when we're all in this fire sale. I need to do something. Deidre, instead of that question, I'm going to throw this one to you. What's the best way to market your events without getting backlash from the stay-at-home crowd who refuse to travel? Have you had any backlash? And I'll start with you, and then I'll go around. I have had many email comments saying they are getting backlash being a planner from people who do not believe we should be traveling at all and saying this is a bad thing. Have you had any of that, Deidre, on your end?
Okay, so I'm going to take advantage of this time to hit three things at once. First of all, I think we do need to kind of separate time periods that we're talking about planning for what we see as being the smaller meetings that are still going to operate in what I call pre-vaccine mentality third quarter of next year to afterwards, okay? So when we look at the meetings that are trying to happen in that first section where we're still really under duress, I don't feel any pricing pressure at all. What I think is actually happening is that people are realizing that things are going to be way more expensive because we can't put 50 people on a 50-person motor coach right now, and we can't put 10 people at a 72-inch round. So actually, there's all these new expenses that are the opposite of saving any money as we're kind of navigating, putting people together in the pre-side of it. So I did want to touch on that pricing. The second thing from my side is that for our DMC, we deal with purely corporate events that are private. So they're not advertising ever that they're having those meetings. So I haven't personally seen any of that where anyone is having any issues because they're not open to the public. They're privately planned, and they're going to be a ways from now.
Okay, that's similar to John. Carla, have you seen anything on the social side where one person will want to plan something and the other that they usually work with says absolutely not? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I see that a lot on the social side.
Okay.
When you have those private events, if you have them at space, I mean, I'm not going to say they're free to do what they want. As the planner, you do institute all those safety measures and things like that, and you bring in people to help kind of facilitate that, but they get comfortable. They're around family. So I do see that a lot on the social side.
Okay.
The kind of, ends of the spectrum.
And Steve, how about you when you're negotiating with a corporate account? Is the CEO wanting an incentive and the COO saying we shouldn't be putting our employees together? I mean, do those discussions get to you, or they have already decided to have a meeting by the time they get to merits?
Well, I think, the big concern is, and it varies honestly by segment that we serve. When I think about the corporate segment, the technology companies are the ones who are pushing further out into the future before they feel comfortable bringing people together again. On the other end of the spectrum is healthcare and automotive. When you think about automotive dealerships, they're open, they're doing business face to face. The dealer principals are wanting to get back out there. Those meetings are happening in small numbers all the time. Large dealer meetings are not occurring because there's no place really to hold them except for maybe our friends in Grapevine. And healthcare meetings as well, they have just completely zoomed out. When you think about healthcare, the business gets done through events, whether it's the medical events, the research events, or whether it's rep events getting together. We actually have seen a spike in January of 2021 with our healthcare companies that we work with getting regional, smaller events together, 50 at a time, 50 people at a time, but 50 events at a time in January and February. So I think that the desire is out there on both the CEO and COO and CFO level. It's really a matter of just doing it in a way that they're confident that it's not going to be an event that reflects poorly on their brand. That's the big concern, is that they don't want their brand attached to an event that can be traced to poor behavior, which resulted in health impact.
Yeah, I didn't invite a lawyer to the panel on purpose because I knew we'd get sidetracked, but I'm just wondering how many are going to say, hey, you planned my wedding, and now Susie's got COVID, and so does Johnny, and you should have known better. I don't even know. Yeah, those of you that don't live in Florida, there's a big movement now for the state to make a decision on immunity for COVID for restaurants, bars, nightclubs, and nobody's willing to go out on a limb yet and write that law, and I'm sure that's happening in every state. So, it's an interesting legal area that I just think is yet to be determined,
Peter, it's part of the national discussion with the legislators. There's a liability part of the bills that both sides are still discussing. There is a whole discussion about liability, and I think it's why we as the event professionals have to make sure that we take real precautions and make sure that we are doing our due diligence to make sure that we are keeping people safe. A COVID compliance officer on site, a medical person on site, all of those things. But that's not just a Florida issue. That is a national issue. Restaurants.
It's a global issue.
It is a global issue. Restaurants are different than we are, and sometimes that's very hard for people to understand. I go to dinner with 6 people. I'm not going to talk to the person next to me. Well, I will. My husband will tell you I'll talk to anybody. But I'm not going to get up and go sit at their table. If I'm at an event, whether it's a corporate event or a social event, and I see Carla across the room, I'm getting up and I'm going to see Carla. It's human nature.
Right.
So,
Right.
That is on a national and global level that people are talking about liability.
Yeah, it is, and it's one of the the law evolves daily anyway, so this is going to be an evolutionary thing. And going back to what you happened to casually mention before, you slipped and fell at a meeting before. Well, we had liability issues before, so we have to have laws in place anyway. So, all right, we got about 10 or 15 minutes left, so I'm going to ask these very short questions, and you just tell me your immediate response. But I'm going to ask all of you, okay? I'll start with Deidre on my left. What is the biggest learning curve you have going into 2021 from the pandemic?
Learning to slow down from going 1,000 miles an hour to doing absolutely nothing and not knowing what to do with myself.
All right. John, how about you? What's your biggest learning curve from 20 going into 2021?
Share your firsthand experiences. I mean, the more you can show people what you're doing and how safe you're traveling and what hotels look like during these times, it will definitely benefit everyone to make the right decision.
Okay. Marianne, 20 to 21, biggest learning curve so far.
Yeah, really to look at this as a gift. And to piggyback on Deidre, I think we were all moving so fast and just regurgitating everything. Now we have a chance to be creative. We have a chance to really find our passion and to really reconnect. I think 2021 has been 2020 has been a true gift for us.
Okay.
And we're going to come out of this stronger than ever.
Okay, now I'm going to be the bad moderator because the others of you have thought of your answers. Now I'm going to switch the question. Steve, what do you predict will be a COVID-19 long-term effect on the meetings and events industry? What jumps out at you as the one main long-term effect?
I think the most profound effect that I can see is going to be more around air travel. And I say that because I think that meetings and events will continue. There is a reason that you need to bring people together face to face. I think what we're going to find at the other end of this, when things are becoming safe, is that the transient travel business is going to drop dramatically to the tune of 50% likely, because so many of those trips were taking place that didn't need to take place. I've heard of one of our clients who saved $1 billion this year, $1 billion on T&E. It's going to be hard for them to go back and put that into their future budgets. When you can do things like this with 8 or 9 people and be very effective if you do it the right way. The other part of this is, even when it comes to hybrid or virtual, design is at the very beginning. Without design, without intent, none of this works. It's the same as face-to-face. Understand what your objective is, design it into the process regardless of the technology, whether it's face-to-face, digital, hybrid. You have to start with design.
All right. Carla, how about you? What's one long-term effect that you see?
What I see sticking is the hybrid model in the virtual world, and kind of doing both. And it's not for all events, but I think I know in the social world there was, a little pushback if you were trying to include grandma or someone overseas, like different aspects of it. There was kind of a pushback, but now you have all those tools. You have companies coming out with all different type of tech to make it effective. You see with conferences, they're able to expand their reach in, a larger audience. So I do think that tech side, that virtual side is going to stick for those, events where it makes sense.
Okay. Paul, how about you? You just executed this great event. What do you think is one thing that'll stick?
So I'm going to be a little counter to my boss, Steve, and build off where Marianne and Nancy were going. We have had a blessing, and we're entering the holiday season, so I'm going to reference "It's a Wonderful Life," and for those younger folks, it's a great movie about an individual named George Bailey who learned what the world would be like if he never existed. And the world has learned what it's like to not have face-to-face interactions, to not have travel and tourism, to not have live events. And the world has realized we are better with them, and we can't advance our society without them. So we have been blessed this year by a George Bailey moment of the world realizing we need to be socially connected in order to advance our societies.
Wow, I love that. I'm gonna clip that part of your statement because that's so right on the money. Right on the money. I love it. What about you, Nancy? What's a long-term effect that you've seen across all the different types of people in Live Event Coalition?
Paul, I just want to say I wish I had a bell right now so that I could ring it and the angel gets their wings. And any of you who've never seen that movie, you have to watch the movie and then you'll understand what the bell stands for. We've heard it. It's an odd thing to say to everybody out there that this has been a year of some blessings. I don't want to diminish the fact that this has been one of the hardest, most challenging and difficult experiences for our industry. Our colleagues are suffering. We are adjusting and we are trying to do everything that we can. The silver lining is that we are not alone. And to me, that is without a doubt the most critical part, to know that if you're having a bad day, you can pick up the phone and you can call somebody. If you just want to make sure that somebody's okay, you can. It was a somewhat competitive industry. You didn't work with people who were the same as you. You had your teams, but I sit on a board with 7 other planners who, before this, while I knew them, I wouldn't have worked with them, and that's not LEC. But, I think that we have to remember that we are better together. that we have to work together, and that we are, I believe, the most critical industry for humans, period. We bring them together, we create experiences, and we create memories. And that we all have the ability to work side by side. To me, that's the greatest part of all of this. And it's a humbling experience to be where I am. And some days it's very hard to have to look at people's faces and say, nope, they haven't passed the bill yet. But I am here if you need to call me. So to me, that's probably what I love for the long term.
Okay. This question is interesting and very fast. Do you think it would be a benefit to your clients to have proof and verification that everyone working their event has been vaccinated? Carla, how about you? Would you proudly say everybody working your event has been vaccinated?
Vaccinated. That's so long from now.
Uh-huh. I didn't think of that when they asked, but if several people said, I would like the planner to show me the list of names and proof that they've all been vaccinated, and they asked in multiple different ways.
Interesting.
There'll be so many other best practices by the time we get to that point of everything vaccinated or enough for it to be effective. So I don't know. I guess the wishful thinking is it holds a lot of weight right now, but I just think it's going to go into play before we even get to that point.
John, how about you? Same sentiments, or?
Yeah, I piggyback on Carla's response there. I think that there's a lot of layers to that. I think it's, when we start talking as event producers, we're also talking about our suppliers as well, hotel staff, transportation. It's going to be so hard to trace, so it's almost too broad, and I think, like Carla had said, we are still far out, so there's going to be a lot more touch points that are going to come up between now and then. So I think, that question could be answered maybe, late April, when we can start to see what distribution looks like.
The first time I got it, and I get all these questions in multiple varieties that ask the same thing, but the first time I got it, I said, well, I never had a roster at my front desk that showed how many of my hotel employees had the flu shot, or if they had their measles updated, so it's a weird question, but it came out because we're also hypersensitive to this vaccine and this pandemic, but I've never had, here's the housekeepers that have the rubella shots, here's the ones who don't, think about it for a minute, it's almost laughable. So last question, and then I'll go around and you can have a closing comment. A lot of people ask me if you could predict when we would be back to 75% of the revenues where we were last year, how long do you think it'll be? So Marianne, if we 75% of 2019 revenue, when do you think that will be?
That's a really good question. It keeps changing. I know back in March I said, I'll be back by the fall of this year. And then, of course, now I'm like, third quarter, 2021 is going to be great. It's hard to say. It's going to take a while for our industry to get back to where we were in 2019. And that's okay because when we do get there, it's going to be stronger than ever. But probably realistically, 2022.
You're sounding like an educator now. You can't really just say, my guess is 2026. Paul, what about you?
75%, I think we'll be back there in 22. I think full recovery is probably 25.
Yeah, okay. Steve, how about you?
The only thing that permanent lesson to be learned is that I have underestimated or overestimated every step of the way. It's.
We all have, my friend.
It is hard to touch that question, but I probably in the same camp as Paul. 75%, probably I'd say 75% maybe at the end of 22 is kind of the trajectory that we would be seeing, and then whatever full recovery is, that's going to be a long time to be determined, because I do think that people are going to find alternatives to events going face to face. It's just going to be a permanent part of. There's going to be a drop in what was 100%. It's going to be a drop until the pie expands.
Yeah, like Nancy said, there is no normal, because I forgot to piggyback on that statement. I picked up my stepmom on September 10th at the airport and went to the gate and picked her up. After September 11th, I could never do that again in my life. So there was no more normal where I could go to the gate and hug my stepmom or dad as they came off the plane. And that really shocked me to my core, because that was a part of my life, always being the one to go right to the gate. I'd always get there early, watch the plane pull in, and that is gone. So there are some parts that will never come back, so we really can't say normal. So first, I want to thank all of you. This has been a great discussion. I'd like for you to have, a closing, very brief comment, and we'll go around. And then, Nancy, I'll start with you, because you're on my bottom left. So what's your closing comment to all those watching the webinar?
I have two. One is to remain hopeful and to remain committed, and don't lose sight of that. Okay, so maybe there's three. The other is, remember that your brand is important. Whoever you are, whether you're a business or you're an individual, right now is the opportunity to make sure that your brand is represented well and stay connected to any and everybody that you can. Because as we do reopen, as Marianne said, there will be a need for people to come back to work. Okay. And last but not least, it's a selfless plug, but please join the Live Events Coalition. We need your voices, and we're there for those who are on the ground. I mean, that's the difference between us potentially and some of the other organizations that I'm all in support of. We're really here to be the voice of our entire industry. And know that if you need me, I'm here. Just reach out.
Yeah, your email's right there, so it's very nice.
My email is right there.
Yeah, I like that. Carla, how about you? Closing thoughts.
I was like to say, the events industry, we are resilient. We will be back. A lot of you have said that already, and it's very true. The community is much stronger than ever before, connecting with so many people. So definitely stay connected. I'm available on LinkedIn. I know Peter mentioned that, so please feel free to reach out. But we're resilient. We will be back.
Great, Paul. How about you?
I'll just add on that. Throughout history, great wars, pandemics, recessions, this industry has shown time and time again it's resilient, it's innovative, it's got courageous leadership, it's going to be back stronger and better than ever, it's more necessary than ever. And for those of you questioning your career choices, there couldn't be a better place. There's so many paths here. There's so many ways to demonstrate your contributions and to learn and to be engaged and have a fulfilling career. So welcome aboard. Be part of this and help us turn this industry around.
Excellent. Thank you. John, how about you?
I think a lot of people touched on it, Peter. Resiliency is number one. I think this is an industry where we've always seen so many variables. Every client's different. Every program's different. We always, manipulate to those situations. And this is a tough one, right? But we'll get through this, and time will tell. It's going to be a tough uphill battle for a little while, but, I think we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So stay strong and stay safe. And like I had mentioned earlier, jump on LinkedIn, go to your social channels when you are traveling and you're walking into a hotel, post what you're seeing, whether it's good, bad, the ugly. Those things make huge impacts. I mean, just through my LinkedIn channel, I get so many reach outs about my corny posts about me flying on airplanes. It's one of those things where it definitely touches folks. So I tell you, just make those firsthand experiences known to as many people as you possibly can. And happy holidays, everyone.
Excellent. Steve, how about you?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in this business. I've been at it for a long, long time. I love what I get to do. I love what we get to do. Everything that everybody mentioned about this being a family. We work with the greatest suppliers in the world. We work with the greatest customers in the world. Every single day we transform lives and businesses through the events that we design and execute. And that, as everyone has said, we need that now more than ever. This is a great industry to be in. It will recover, and there is so much good yet for us to do that let's just stay strong. Let's get to the other side of this, and then let's get this thing going again.
Excellent. And Deidre, how about you?
Well, I'd second that as well. I mean, I think that we do need to hang in there, and the goal needs to be to get to the other side and to do whatever it takes to get there. Take advantage of this time to do some really good and deep thinking. And if you can, get involved in some of these organizations that we've talked about today, because for sure what we have learned is that many hands make light work. And we're making great progress. There are many areas of our industries that we are redesigning and reevaluating and improving. And this is an exciting time to be part of that. So I truly encourage people to participate.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to go out on a limb, and I don't know if I get in trouble, but I always ask for forgiveness later. Anybody who's watching this, we have a meetings and events certificate online in the spring. I will personally use either my funds or my foundation funds to give you a $100 scholarship off the cost of that if you want to take it. Because if you continue your education in this downtime, then you can use that $100 to join one of the professional organizations we talked about today, whether it's SITE, MPI, ILEA, NACE, live events, Deidre, I never get the destination management. Tell me how it's
ADME.
ADME. It's Association of Destination Management Executives International. And I always forget how to say their acronym. But any one of them, plus there's others, Women in Travel Thrive, whatever. So if you want to take me up on that, I'll do that. And my email is hospitality@fau.edu. Everyone here has been so gracious. I've reached out to them. Many I've never met before. Some I've known for years, and I want to thank all of you for being, truly hospitable in your spirit and your willingness to serve on the webinar. I thank all of you, and I thank all of you that watched, and keep our optimism and hope. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye, all.